Hi, and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be making 3 cards. These are handmade cards for men, and I'm going to be using this watercolor paper. It's not an expensive brand. It is £140, and it is really very good for this particular kind of technique. It has a rough side and a slightly smoother side, and it's not a super smooth side, but today I'm going to be working on the smoother side for this particular technique. I am working with Distress ink re-inkers, and I'm using 3 colors as my base, and that is Salty Ocean, and that is Mustard Seed, and then Twisted Citron. So these are going to be my first layer, and I will actually be adding oxides on top of these. So here I'm just adding little droplets of these re-inkers. They're very strong color wise to my white pad, and I'm spraying with water, and I'm also spraying the paper with water, and I'm just picking up the colors to create a background. And you can see the yellow, the green, and the blue, how beautifully they work together there. Then I'm going to go in with these Distress oxides, and that is Blueprint Sketch, Mustard Seed, and Ripe Persimmon. The oxides are going to, I did dry the background, and the oxides are going to go on top of a dry background. So I'm just spraying the colors, the 3 colors, kind of randomly in between. And then I'm taking some cling wrap, and normally I get this ready ahead of the time. For this first one I didn't. Then I spray heavily with water, and I just pop the cling wrap on top, and the Distress inks on the underneath are reacting with the oxides on top, so the colors don't look as blotchy as they did when you just have the 2 layers and they haven't had a chance to kind of work together. But once I put the cling wrap on and I kind of gather it in spots, it really pulls the colors together beautifully. So I've taken the cling wrap off a little bit too early for the sake of this video, so I'm just going to dry it. And here you can see this beautiful effect that the oxide creates with the stronger colors underneath. And I actually did 2 with these same kind of colorways, so you can see that you can really, every sheet that you make is going to be a completely different sheet. The one I think had more oxide on it, and one a little less oxide, so same colors but a different effect. I kept blotting up all of my colors that I'd been using. Rather than just clean them up with a paper towel, I blotted them onto a sheet of cardstock, and you'll see later on that I actually liked it so much that I finished it. So here's the second sheet, and this is Walnut Stain Vintage Photo, and this is Peacock Feathers. And then for the Distress oxides, I'm using Tea Dye and Antique Linen. So I'm just going to repeat this process of just putting drops of water down and picking them up, and then mopping up the excess with the piece of cardstock that I will be using later on. So you can see the browns and that turquoise, how beautifully they've mixed on that page. I spared you having to watch it. So I did dry this page first, obviously, this piece of paper, and now I'm going in with the 2 colors of oxides, and I'm just quite liberally spraying. You can see the 2 different colors, the more sort of cream color and then the more slightly orangey color of the tea dye. And you can see the reaction already happening with the colors underneath, how that peacock blue is really pulling up. And here's just like when it's finished. Here's one of the finished pieces that I've done, and this is just to show you, I'm again drying this just to show you that beautiful effect of the colors of the oxide on top of the Distress colors. Really comes out beautiful. And then here's the piece that I was just mopping everything up, and for this I am using weathered wood, and I'm literally just spraying it on directly on top. I'm not even worried too much, because the colors from the underneath are going to come through, again mixing it with water. And this time I'm just going to take some of the cling wrap and mush it around a little bit, and I'm not going to actually leave it on there to dry like this, because I'm going for a slightly different effect. It is still going to have a little bit of a mottly, crackly effect, and this turns out really, really pretty. And you can see there, I pulled it off when it was still quite wet. I do a little bit of drying, and then I decided that it was still quite a lot of a distinct red in the middle, and I wanted to just pull that back a little bit, so I've added some more of the weathered wood. And then I'm just using the cling wrap to dab it, and again just to mottle it up a little bit and to create a very kind of distressed background, I guess. And it's amazing the colors, the oxide on top of the colors. So I just added some stamps here. I'm just showing you. These are all Tim Holtz stamps that I used, and you can use anything you want. I'm not into particularly saying you have to use this or that product. Here I'm just showing a whole bunch of the papers that I made. I made a whole bunch of them for other cards too. And I have these ready cut cards and matching envelopes, so I'm just going to start taking my sheets and cutting them to size. I like to have a about 1/8 of an inch all the way around the edge showing, and it just so that the actual card blends as part of the finished item. So you can see I'm just picking colors of card stock that really go well. And so this is the Father's Day card, so we're actually getting into the card making part right now. And I'm picking up the colors that are in the background, which is like that ripe persimmon and the salty ocean. I think actually in this case I decided to go with broken china and ripe persimmon, just because once the colors are blended they're not necessarily completely pure to themselves. And I'm just going to use a piece of sticky grid to hold my background down. So the great thing with this particular sticky grid, it's kind of a larger size. You can cut it to suit, and then you can reuse them for quite a long time. I just bought this recently and love it. And I'm just using a like distressed harlequin check, and this is the ripe persimmon. So I'm going to just brush it through a section in the top corner, in the top right hand corner. And definitely you do have to put quite a good layer on. I do prefer to use the pads for this rather than the spray. It's just a different look. Clean off the stencil, and then I'm going to cover the orange so I don't see any of the orange with the stencil, and I'm now going to go in with the broken china, and you'll see the effect that this is not one of those shifting stencils, but pretty much what I've done is I've just shifted the stencil a little bit, and I've now gone in with a second color. And blue and orange are complementary colors, so they work really, really well on this card that does have some blue and it does have some of that ripe persimmon in it. So that's the start. And this is ground espresso that I'm using, and I'm just going to go around the edge. And I do go in a fair little bit because again it's kind of the colors will blend a little bit into each other, because the distress always activates whenever it gets wet. So this is what it's looking like so far. And then I'm just going to use these rub-ons. These are mixed media transfers. These are by Andy Skinner. And I'm going to use this kind of vintage style car. I really liked it for this card. That one there. So it's just a case of cut it out, remove the backing. Don't try to rub it on with the backing on. And you just use a stick that comes with the transfers and rub it on to the card. It's as simple as that. These transfer really, really well, and you can actually see them transferring. They go kind of grey, and it transferred absolutely perfectly. Came out really good. And then I just take a white highlighter, and I'm just going to add a few little details with a white highlighting pen. This is a white Signal pen, and I really do like these Signal pens. I usually buy about 4 or 5 at a time because I go through them a lot. I use them a lot in my art journaling as well. So they're very, very good for this. I'm just going to let you see this in real time a little bit so that you don't just see everything so fast forwarded. But I'm just picking up highlights in the lights and picking up highlights in the grill, a little bit on the windows and a little bit on the wheels. So just tiny little amounts, but against the colored background it does pop a little bit more than just having the color show through the entire area of the car, especially in the windows. I really liked it on the windows. So let me just see if you can have a look there, right? So just a few little white highlights. And then I'm using this stamp set by Tim Holtz and Stamperia, and I'm using that particular stamp. And I'm going to use, I think I use the ground espresso again, and that's a distress oxide, not just the distress ink. Really, really love this stamp. So I don't want to have a shocking edge on it. Yes, good guess. So I'm just going to ink it up, and I'm not going to go quite to the edge of the stamp, just the more the outer edge of the stamp. And there you can see a little bit. And I do leave photos at the end for you to have a look at. And then there's like an actual stamp mark in it. I'm just going to use that randomly to create a little bit more interest in the background. I do love layered backgrounds. So here's a piece that I'd cut off one of my other pieces of paper that I'd made, and this is one of the first ones that I made. And I'm just going to pick and choose a piece. It's got some of the blues in it, it's got some of the oranges in, so it's picking up a little bit on that patterning in the corner. Just trimming it off, and I'm just going to show you how I make a crease. So I'm just using a ruler and a pair of scissors to score rather than an actual score tool, because it's nice and sharp. Black VersaFine Clair, Nocturne as its real name is. Great ink, this VersaFine. The only thing is it's very slow drying. You do have to be careful until it's dry, or dry it with a heat tool. So I'm just going to add some black etching to make it pop. And although I've done the walnut, I used the ground espresso on the outside, the very edge I did small black. So here I'm going to stamp the word DAD, D-A-D, and this is a stamp set that I bought a long time ago. And so I'm just going to take my piece down, and of course I have to use the D twice, so I'm going to do the D and the A, and then I'll have to do another D. I was really careful to make sure I lined this up very straight, and careful with my placement on the stamping platform, or sorry, in this case the acrylic block, because I usually always use a stamping platform. I'm just using a light gray, and this is a pigment ink. It's one that I don't even know what brand it is. It's one I've had for a long time. And then I'm using a silver embossing powder. This is a real metallic silver embossing powder, and I did use my embossing little rub thing to stop anything extra from sticking. I don't know what you call those little pads. And then he'd embossed so quickly and so beautifully. And just where I've created the fold, I wanted to make that black as well, so it all kind of tied in together. Then I decided I needed another rub, so I'm using that little rub there. And these rubs are available in most, I think, good craft stores. I always buy from Country Lane in Cloverdale, even though I'm now in Osoyoos. She always ships all my stuff to me. So then I'm going to also take this license plate number rub, and I'm going to just place it on the diagonal, rub it on. So this is the process that I have. You know, I don't necessarily have something absolutely full on in my head. I'm putting pieces together, and as I'm working, I kind of go, I need a little bit more here, I need a little bit more there, and so that's what I was doing. And then I just took some black VersaFine Clair ink, and I just did some little postmark stamps and little mini stamp sets. I think that one just says Route 66. That one I wanted to go a little bit lighter, so I did a ghost stamp, which is where you stamp off the first, and then you just use the second or second and third impressions. So again, just filling up some of the background to make it more interesting to look at. So now I'm using a thin foam mounting adhesive. It's not a really thick one, so it's not going to really stand away from the card, which is great, because if you want to mail this card out, it's not hard to just mail it in its regular envelope, and not have to pay anything sort of extra. And you know, you can make your cards whatever size you like. I mean, I'm not saying you really have to make a card that looks exactly like this card. These are just hopefully inspirational videos that will help you to use up some of the supplies that you already have, and substitute with what you actually have, rather than feeling like you have to rush out and buy a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to attach the card with a double-sided tape. And it's not common for me to do this, simply because I do find it hard to get it really exact before I push it down. But in this case, I did get it absolutely right. But you'll see later on, I just switched to glue. Now I wanted to put a second layer inside my card, so it's exact matching cardstock. And I'm just going to glue with a very thin, very fine glue. The glue I'm using is called Dries Clear. So I'm just putting a second layer in. It just gives it nice substance. And these actually do have matching envelopes as well, which is a plus for me. I do like that they're all matched. And this is kind of a really vintage color as well. Really, really liked this. These are not cards that you're going to mass produce. So here's my second card. And this is a piece of paper that I just soaked up everything else with, that piece of cardstock that I just literally soaked everything else up with. And then I used some Tim Holtz stamps, his light bulbs and his gears and stuff like that, to create more interest in the background. And I'm going to use that vintage car, and then I'm going to use this die cut. So this is a Sizzix set. It's like a framelits. And then I just take a piece of cream paper. I'm going to rub my car onto it, because I want this to stand out in a sort of different way from what I've done with the first card. And then I'm just going to cut it out, this little frame shape, and there it is. And then I'm kind of trying to figure out what color will look really, really great to go onto the cream, that will really pick up the colors in this background. So I made these swatches maybe a month or so ago, and boy, they've just been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So I started with a bundled sage, but I didn't have it in the oxide, but I did have it in the Distress ink pad. So I decided to go with that and give it a try. So I'm just using a little tiny brush, a little stencil brush, and I'm just rubbing the color all around. And then I'm going into this Entomology set, Tim Holtz, because it has a block in it with a really, really, really tiny script. And so I'm just now adding, with Vintage Photo, I'm just adding a little bit of tiny script around the outside edge. But you will see later on I decide that it's just not quite got enough color, and I do go back in with more color. But in the meantime, back with what we're doing here. This is a stencil that I just bought. It's really got a lot of masculine things on it, but I really just loved the sentiment. And so I decided that I was going to do an embossed sentiment. But what I'm doing with this one is I'm actually using an embossing paste. So I'm going to figure out where I want to put it, tape it all up, and I'm using a thick embossing paste to go through, and then remove it. This is a very fine stencil, so I did have to be a little bit careful not to tear it when I was taking the tape off, but it stenciled really, really beautifully. And then while it was wet, I put this gold detail embossing powder onto where I had done the molding paste, the stenciling. And then I have to actually set this aside to dry, because if you emboss it when it's wet, it kind of bubbles, which is great. You'll see later on I actually want that look, but for this one I wanted it, because it's writing, I wanted it really clear. So that is iced spruce, and it's a Distress oxide. And this is where I decided that it didn't quite have enough of a color match to the background for me. It just has to pick up a little bit more of the kind of more grayish green color. And then here, this is now dry, I'm just embossing. And you can see how metallic gold that is. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So picking up on the metallic theme, I'm just using a gold washi tape. I'm just going to put a strip down the side. Just tuck the edges over. And I'm still playing with exactly where I want this. I ended up actually going slightly off of the page with everything, and I really like that look. And then this is some Tim Holtz washi tape, and I used two different ones from here. So I'm going to use the one in my right hand that's just got like tiny golden colored flowers. They're not metallic, but it's just going to take away a little bit of the metallic and leave some of the metallic on the outside. And then I love this one that's just got like rows of numbers on it. So a little bit kind of grungy, but it's probably as grungy as I ever get. I'm so sorry, Tim Holtz. I'm just not a grungy girl. And then the Professor, I use the light bulbs. There's two different light bulbs on there, a larger one and a smaller one. And you'll see that I always, aren't they cool? Just so cool, like the Edison bulbs. I always double up on everything when I'm stamping in case I mess up when I'm coloring. So I'd stamped 4, but I know already that I'm only using 2. So I'm going to color 2 if I don't mess them up. By the way, VersaFine, Claire, make sure you dry your ink before you go in. Once it's dry, it doesn't react with water. So I'm using these Zig watercolor brushes. So it's a yellow, there's kind of a beigey color. I'm using like a mint green, and a gray, which is for blending. And then this is just like a honey gold color. So I'm just going to use these to color in and make it look like it's a brass old, pick up on the gold theme, old light bulb. And don't worry, I'll show it to you I'll show you clearer in a minute. I didn't mess anything up, so I only had to do the 2. And then I take some white, this is the white signal mark pen, and I just do some highlighting in actual white. Because I stamped it on cream, when you use the white highlighter, it really does pop it. It's really great. And so there are the 2 light bulbs. Then I just fussy cut them. Honestly, it doesn't take long. Some people just hate fussy cutting. I'm not one of them. So I just fussy cut the light bulbs out, and then I take the black VersaFine Clair, and I just go all the way around the edge. Because I stamped it in black, it just really takes that white old cream edge away and makes it pop a little bit. So I'm figuring out where I want them to go. And that's where I want. And you can see I just go slightly off the background. With the car and with the outside light bulb. Now I'm just going to do a little edge all the way around in black. And I also edged the little cut out the framed car, and I had forgotten to do any white highlighting, so at this point in time I remembered and did some white highlighting. So now I'm just with the pencil, I'm just going to draw a line straight up because I want to create like a chain, as if the light bulbs are hanging from a chain. So just very lightly with a pencil. I don't even bother to erase it afterwards. You can't see it. And then this is like a gold signal marker. And again, as I say, almost everything I possess comes from Country Lane and Cloverdale. And I will see if I can make a link to their online store if anybody wants to order any of the stuff from her. So I'm just using, again, just this thin tape. I don't want to make these bulky cards in case I want to mail one of these out somewhere. So tiny little bit of this 3D foam double-sided tape, and then I'm putting a drop of glue on the top part so that it doesn't look like it's hanging away from the chain. It's like on the chain, and then it's slightly 3Ds off of the page. I mean, it's very subtle, but it works really well for me. See, it's not really thick, so that looks, and I'm like, there's something missing. So I'm looking at this, I'm putting it on, it's like, yeah, it looks pretty cool, but there's something missing. So I very stupidly glued the backing on, and this is what we do, you know, when we're creating. Then I realized I know exactly what I need, so I took this plus sign, and actually Tim Holtz has a really good plus sign stencil too, but I don't have it simply because I've had this one for, I used to use this on costuming, so I've had it literally for years. So I'm just doing some little plus signs with the modeling paste, and while it is wet, and it's not perfect because it doesn't have to be, it can be a little grungy, so I'm just putting this gold detail embossing powder on again, and it works really beautifully. You have the dimension, but it's metallic, so I just really liked how this card came out, especially against the kind of chalky finish of the oxide. So there's that one finished. So I love that this was made with that piece of cardstock that I was just dabbing up all the excess ink. Just crazy how great that turned out. So here's the birthday card, and I'm going to try and pick up some of these colors. This was the vintage photo walnut stain peacock feathers behind with the tea dye and antique linen on top. It came out really, really pretty. So I'm going to use this stamp set also by Tim Holtz. This is called Theories, and I'm going to use the guy with the birthday balloon, that one, and I'm going to stamp him onto some watercolor paper, the same watercolor paper I used earlier. And I'm going to use the seedless mustard seed. I'll get there. Mustard seed, ripe persimmon, one of my favorite colors obviously at the moment. And then this is actually faded jeans. Just again, whatever colors you used when you're doing this, the technique for the background, you sometimes have to just pick colors that match really well with the blend of how everything works together. So I'm going to spray this with water, and then I'm just going to dab into the persimmon, a little drying in between. Just, it helps to layer. It helps the next color go on a little bit bolder, I think. So then I did the same with the yellows, the blues, and then I sprayed with water, let some blending happen, and I just keep dabbing until I get to a stage where I'm happy. So you can start to see how the green develops between the blue, the orange, and the yellow, and that's exactly what I wanted, because the background has, the peacock feather has created like greens amongst the vintage photo. I just love how these colors work together, and the effects that you get, so unpredictable. So there's my background, and here's my foreground. So I'm going to stamp this in my Tim Holtz stamping platform, and again I'm going to use a piece of this sticky grid. It's like a double-sided tape almost, except that it's removable and reusable. I love it. So I've got it on the side for a rubber stamp, which is what this is. So I'm inking it up with my black VersaFine Clair, which is pretty much the only black that I ever seem to use. And because I'm doing it on this watercolor paper, even the smooth side is a little textured. But I'm not going to worry too much about it, because I'm just going to use a charcoal gray marker. I don't want to use black, because otherwise it'll make everything else around it look very gray. Because when you stamp onto the oxide, it definitely kind of is not as intense a black, for sure. So I just touched up anywhere that I felt was needing a little bit of a touch up, made the basic man with the balloon stronger. And again, I'm going to use one of these Sizzix sets of framelits, and I have to find the size that fits perfectly. And I think that's the one for me. If you didn't know, those of you who don't know me, you may not know this, but I'm an absolute Tim Holtz fan. So this is the third largest size. There he is all cut out. And to make him pop against that background, I'm just going to use some black all the way around the edge, and this time I'm using only the black on this card. So all the way around the edge, just to frame it, to bring the eye back into the center. And it's just really like outlining. I do this so much. I do it even in my art journals. I do it all the time. So you can see how the color of the cardstock of the card really works well with that vintagey look. Color wise, it's really great. So then I decided I would pop some real bright colors on here. So I'm going to take these balloons. They are a memory box, I think, set of balloons. I've had them forever, but I mean, balloons are an easy shape to cut if you don't have a die of balloons. And I'm going to pick up the colors from this background, so you can really see there's some nice bright yellows, bright blue, bright greenish, like a minty green, and then there's the persimmon. So just take one of each, die cut them, and there's my 3 little balloons. And as I do with everything, I have to edge them with black. So there's the VersaFine Clair coming back to my rescue, and I just edge all of them. Now at this point of time I should have done a little bit of stamping on them. I didn't, so at a later stage you will see me going in and adding with that Tim Holtz stamp with the very, very super tiny script from the entomology set. So if you're smarter than me, you'll watch the video and then you'll create your cards, so you might want to stamp them ahead of time. So again, I'm just using this little skinny pop-up. It's not very deep of a pop-up, but it's just a little bit away. I just like that there's some dimension to the card without it being so dimensional that you can't pop it into the mail. The green one I am going to glue so that it's flat against the background, and then the yellow and the persimmon colored ones, I'm going to leave them away from the background. So I'm going to glue these on before I put my little featured man with the balloon on the bottom, and that is so that I can draw some string. So again, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue just where the balloon would be attached to the string, so it's not like a balloon floating separate and the string on the background and the balloon in the foreground. And again, this glue that I use is called Dries Clear, because it does dry clear. If you touch it somewhere and you just leave it alone, you will not even see that it was there. It's a really super glue, and it stays really, really well. And it's liquid enough that I can put it in this bottle with a really needle nose. So I have not taken the backing off of those strips yet, and that's because I wanted to do this. So I'm taking a silver signal marker, and these write beautifully, even on top of the Distress Oxides. They write absolutely beautifully. So now I have my little silver strings, and I'm going to attach my little man. So just ahead of everything coming up, somehow I lost a whole chunk of my video, which was just where I was doing some stenciling and modeling paste. So before I got there, I decided to put a word on, and the word I chose was wish, and this is from a Sizzix Tim Holtz set, and it's got its own shadowing, so I really like these words. So I'm going to do the background in black and the foreground in silver. But then I thought the balloons needed something, so here I go with that little stamp. I'm just adding little words, little tiny script words. Yes, you probably can't see, but you'll see in the photograph. And this is hickory smoke that I'm using, and that's a Distress Oxide. So I don't know if you can see, but I'll try to show you. There it is. So I'm going to cut out the word wish. As I said, the background I'm going to do in just plain black cardstock, and the foreground of the word wish in silver mirror cardstock. And I just put them on with 3D tape, tiny little strips of 3D tape. And for the word I actually used a slightly thicker 3D tape. So here I'm actually using silver on top of modeling paste, and it's just a Tim Holtz stencil, it's just numbers, and I actually did that while the modeling paste was wet, so it's kind of very bubbly, and I just also stenciled some numbers. That's the part where my video just completely got stuck. So here are our 3 cards. The last one, the birthday card, the middle one, kind of a good card for all occasions or promotion, and the Father's Day card. And the cellophane that I was showing, that's how I like to keep my cards. I store them in cellophane bags. So here are the matching envelopes, which to me is a little bonus. I hope that you feel inspired to make some of these cards, and they are definitely not mass producible, but they are wonderful as cards for a very special somebody. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to watch my video today. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I have got some details at the very end of this video.